per unit, and then we're going to start talking about continents. And well, it's going to be more like continental regions because we might talk about the continent and some of the surrounding islands or and things like that, right? So it's a little arbitrary on my part, but it's a little systematic. But since we're here, we're probably going to start with North America and then move to South America, and then we'll move across the Atlantic and move east and south from there. So, all right. So, on that fine note, so welcome, folks. It is April the 19th, and we're going to finish up Unit 1 in our world geography. We don't have terribly too much of this left, so we're going to finish it up and all that good stuff. Please make sure that you are completing your study island and that you are also, is that what I'm looking for? Yeah, working on your project. If you have any problems, please email me, and I'll help you out the best I can. All right, so last time we were talking about all these things, such as the characteristics of population and migration. Remember, we were talking about death rate, birth rate, life expectancy, push-pull factors, urbanization. Some of these things are ancient and some of these things are more modern, such as we know that there were cities in the ancient days. However, there were very few and far between, And nowadays, a lot of people live in cities, like Oedipus, Latinist. Hey, Jacob, you're going to have to put up your manga comic book over there. All right. So, global cultures. Culture, the way of life of a group of people. Now, this is different than the historian's definition of culture. You know what the historian's definition of culture is?
No.
Language. That's it. It's because it's so hard to get people to agree on what the definition of culture is. So some people are like, well, it has this. Well, it has that. Oh, it has this. Well, it has that. Until everybody's like, well, okay, what do they all have in common? Language. Language has shared culture that is inherited with it. It's complicated when you have polyglots, people who speak multiple languages or live in multiple countries. But we're talking about congruently, like the whole, like big groups of people, usually has to do with language. Language comes with its own shared culture because if you think in a language, often it shapes how you reason things out as well. It shapes how you describe things, which can hide or share biases. So there's a lot to it. Elements of culture. Let's do. So here we're having geography again. Language. Latin America, you generally find Spanish and Portuguese, though there are a lot of people in Latin America who still speak Mayan dialects, right? They don't speak Spanish. They don't speak Portuguese. They speak an Indian language. And of course, in some places you find francophones. Of course, this has to do with more in the Caribbean islands. Religion. So for an example here is what we call, or what they're calling here, is the Muslim world, found mostly in North Africa and the Middle East. And also, of course, you see Southeast Asia, right? So the thing is about Islam is that it was very, very transferable. And so, it starts here in Saudi Arabia. It spreads all through here. And of course, we know that it's spread down through here. It spread all the way to Western China, so on and so forth. And we know that there's actually quite a few people in India as well, not just Bangladesh, but India who are also Islamic. So, and especially with like modernity and human migration, we know that it's spreading all through the place in Europe, America, and stuff like that. So, but if you want to look at traditionally, you could make the case that these are traditionally Islamic places, and culturally as well. So culture, which has to do with like laws and customs as well, political and economic systems. So this where like things can get very dicey here because these aren't all inclusive definitions. But remember, the whole point of this unit is about broad overview. And we know that there are more than this, but that's fine. So you have levels of government, unitary system. All power is held by a central government. This is also called centrism or a centrist government. As it's all the central government, right? So, and that can come in multiple forms as far as how that power is held by a central government. It could be diffused through like bureaucracies. It could also have democratic elements or non-democratic elements. You have federal system, which is much like we're supposed to have here today. Power is divided between state and national government. And so you'll find that this is the case in countries that have separate states like the United States or cantons or provinces and things like that. And it varies from country to country how that division of power is. Some places you might have more in the smaller states. Some places it's more centralized, but there are still some local decisions. This can have to do with culture or it can have to do with political philosophy. Types of government, autocracy, totalitarianism. And so here in autocracy, their definition is single ruler holds all the power. Now you can have an autocracy with more than one person in power, obviously, because the dictator has to appoint people to do certain things. They're not omniscient, they're not like everywhere all the time. You have absolute monarchy. You could find this at the, especially towards the end of the French monarchy. Like when you think of Louis XVI, for example, or Louis XIV. Constitutional monarchy. I don't know so much about this one because I'm trying to think of a good constitutional monarch that was an autocrat. Because I guess Napoleon would call himself that. But yeah, I guess like Napoleon's the only example I can think of. An oligarchy ruled by a small group. And so an oligarchy can be it can be like a rule of the elders, like we saw in ancient Sparta, but it could also be like an aristocracy where you're ruled like by a group of nobles, or like even the founders in America talked about having sort of an aristocracy of what was supposed to be well-educated experts, right? They were supposed to be the ones that people would select from to rule the republic. Ruled by rich landowners. You could see this in the South in antebellum America before the Civil War. It was something like 95% of all of the wealth was held by less than 1% of Southerners. And the same could be said for also slaves. And so it was very, very centralized into a small group of essentially wealthy people. Democracy. Government where people vote and elect leaders. And we know this comes through different shades and forms. Direct democracy, people vote directly on issues. So like we could go back to ancient Athens where they could collect and essentially just vote on anything. And representative. People elect others to make decisions for them. And the most common form of a representative government is a parliamentary system. And like we see in England and throughout most of Europe and a lot of the world, actually, a lot of the world. So like one of the characteristics that are different between a republic and a parliament is mostly that republics have more checks to slow down lawmaking, whereas parliaments are kind of made to where lawmaking is a very fast process, and hindering a lawmaking process is more likely to hurt a member of parliament, whereas than it is in a republic in many ways. You can get a vote of no confidence, the next thing you know, you lose your seat in most parliaments. Whereas in a republic, you have to fill out your term no matter what, and people can forget by the time it's over. So there's it depends on your political philosophy. Do you mistrust laws that are made quickly, or do you want to be able to hammer out issues as soon as they pop up? So it's kind of like which one's for you.
Is good.
We'll talk about that later, Jose. All right, so economic system. So once again, it's broad. So traditional economy, things are done the way that they've been always done. So I don't like that. I don't like that one because I mean that could be just like anything. I mean, what are they talking about? Are they talking about like trade caravans to the Sahara Desert? I mean, I don't know. All right. So market economy, which is also known as capitalism, producers and consumers decide what is made. Like, there's never been really, as far as I know, a modern country that's done full free market economy, because that would take. I don't. Not modern Singapore. Singapore is one of the most regulated places on earth, from my understanding. Hmm? I have to look it up. I know that it attracts a lot of economic pull, but I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I know, like, as far as individual rights, though, there have been a lot of complaints about violation of law, due process, and things like that. But I don't know about their economy. I know they do very well.
I remember hearing that.
That would be amazing, because like one thing, like Americans, we really talk a lot about free market economy, but we never really had a full free market economy. It's been like the idea. And it was very influential on the founders because Adam Smith. All right, producers make goods or produce services, and consumers consume goods and services. And the reason that you call it capitalism is because capital is interchangeable with the word property. And so individuals can own property, they can own money, and they can do with it as they please. So they can invest and own businesses. And the consumers decide what stays on the market and what goes away. So if there's a bad product, even if it's dangerous, people, being rational human beings, eventually avoid it. Therefore, the product goes away. But if it's a good product or the best product, people gravitate towards that. And of course, there's other things too. And we talk about that in economics senior year. Supply and demand. This is a feature of capitalism. In fact, supply and demand is a feature of all economies if you really break it down. The balance between what is available and what people want. And so this works with pricing especially. So if there's a large supply of a commodity, the price goes down. But if there's a low supply, even if it's artificially low, like diamonds, there's a lot of natural diamonds within the earth, but they're very controlled, and only so many are allowed to go out into circulation at a time. So by keeping the supply low, the price goes up. And it also has to do with demand. Demand means how much do you want something? If you want something very badly, you'll pay more for it. But if you don't really want it and you think it's just like an everyday thing, you're not going to pay a lot for it. Mixed economy, a blending of different economic systems. Like that would be like what America's like, right? So like in America, people can own their businesses. They can invest their own capital. They can seek profit. They can buy and sell goods. However, there are also certain things, like certain sectors of where the government controls the economy, such as like fuel, for example, or imports and exports through tariffs and embargoes. Of course, also subsidies. Subsidies are like essentially like money that government gives to certain businesses, and also regulations that close down certain businesses and won't even let them open up. And so you see like a mixed economy. Now, command economy, the government decides what's produced. That's very generally speaking. So the first example is you have socialism. There's different kinds of socialism, just like there's different forms of capitalism. Everything is jointly owned by everyone. And by everyone, we generally mean the government. Some early forms of socialism that were pushed were essentially having like local workers own a business, like the guys who work at like, I don't know, like a shoe factory all own the shoe factory. That would be like an early example back in the industrial age. Communism, government owns everything. There's no private property. Now, of course, there's a lot of social things that go along with this as well, but this is very generally speaking. The reason it's called command economy is because instead of the consumers and the business owner deciding what is produced, what's invested in, you essentially have government bureaucracy deciding how much of something needs to be produced for a nation. Um, it can be very efficient in some areas, such as military goods, but it can be very inefficient in other areas because it's very difficult to understand exactly how much of something that everyone across the nation needs because it's so much data and it varies so much for so many variables that it's a very hard thing to keep up with. So there's always going to be what we call shortages, which is also has to do with motivation. Like people don't like working to help the great cause that often. Usually people want profit. So resources, trade, and the environment. Resources, what nations have to produce the things that they need. So of course we know there's many kinds of resources. I know you probably talked about this in your like early science classes. Hey Jaden, you okay? Jaden?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hey, can you open your eyes? Are you dead? Okay, good. Wake up. Open your eyes. They're rolling in the back of your head.
I'm so tired.
I'm sorry you're tired. Just give me a couple more minutes. All right.
I know
So-
it's not your fault. I'm just gonna go to bed until late.
I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Me too. I was trying to go to bed, and one of my wife's cats peed on the bed, and so then I was like so mad. I had to change the sheets, and oh man, I can't stand cats. But
So what time did you go to bed last night?
it's about 11:30. But then I woke up at 4.
What? Like I'm talking about like 4 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You need to fix that. All right.
I usually go to bed. My bedtime is usually 10:30, but
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I usually go to bed 10:30 and I wake up 5:30. But
oh yeah.
not today. All right, natural resources. You know that. Natural resources come from the earth. Wood, petroleum, iron. Like it's the stuff that's around you. Come on. Natural resources. Let me see. Oh yeah, renewable are the ones that we can get more of. Soil, forest, the sun. Non-renewable natural resources we can no longer get more of. So fossil fuels. In fact, they haven't even been able to reproduce petroleum in laboratory settings. We know that it has characteristics of heat, time, and pressure, but it's like I don't know. We can't quite figure out the secret sauce how to make more of it. Capital resources, plants and equipment, infrastructure, money for investment. So, so we're talking about money. You need money to make things happen. But you also need the stuff to make things happen, especially when we talk about like manufacturing. You can't just tell somebody, hey, you need to start making cars. They can't just fly off and do that. It takes time and development and resources to make the machinery, the know-how to do that. Human resources, well, it's people. And human resources have different kinds of things to us, like education levels, skills, natural talent and ability, and entrepreneurial ability. So this has to do with your motivation, your motive. And the motive's usually profit for most people. You have an idea, but it's more than idea. Everybody's got some dumb idea for a business. You got to have something else too. You got to have work ethic. You got to have some real know-how. Employees, guys, some luck too. Like there's some businesses where they are really on the edge of disaster. Like restaurants. Most restaurants fail after you open them up. Statistically speaking, I think it's like something like 7 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. It's really high. All right. All right, kids, we're almost done. Levels of economic activity. So primary economy has to do economic activities deal directly with natural resources. So when I was talking about countries that mostly do export industries, such as like agricultural goods and oil, this is primary economies. Most countries have some form of this, but some countries, this is basically all they got. Secondary is manufacturing. So this is industry. So you can think about like America back in the 50s, right? Like making a bunch of cars and airplanes, stuff like that. Tertiary, service industries and retail. So there's some guy teaching, I guess, and there's a babe working at a hotel lobby. So this is essentially where it's just based only around people doing things but not making things. And so that's one of the funny things where you could think about, like, say, technology, like computers and stuff, just online businesses, where you're kind of like between these two things. You're manufacturing something digitally, but you're also providing a long-term service. And so, of course, you could do that with the automobile industry as well. You can manufacture the automobile, and then you could hypothetically have your own system of like repair garages and part replacement parts and stuff. But, anyway. All right, world trade. The world has an uneven distribution of resources. That's pretty apparent. There are poor countries and rich countries. Not every country has everything it needs to survive and continue to develop.
Yeah, my.
Well, not all countries have all the resources that they need for all the things that they need. Not all countries have petroleum. Not all countries have good sources of metals, or arable land to grow food. And that's where trade comes in. You trade what you have for what you don't have. Comparative advantage. Countries will make what they can sell for profit and import what they cannot make for themselves. That's rational. You make the best things that you can make, and you sell those things, and you will maximize your profit. If you're the best at doing it, do it. Interdependence. Countries need to trade with each other, and countries are interdependent these days. No country is that I can think of, all right, I'll say that, but I'm sure there are some, is solely shut off from trade and doing well by relying on their own skill and resources. Even the most closed off countries have some form of imports and some form of exports. Even North Korea, they trade quite a bit with, say, like China for things. They trade out a lot of coal for certain things like rice and manufactured goods with China, right? So Iran does a lot.
China trade with the U.S. and then
Sure.
whatever they got from the U.S. trade with North Korea.
Well, I don't know if it's quite like that. But
China doesn't import. They mostly export.
well, yeah, Canada does do a lot of exports. Did you say Canada or China?
China.
Well, they do. I know they do import some things like energy things, a lot of energy things, from my understanding. Multinational corporations, businesses that operate in more than one nation. So, well, you know that. Like, there's a McDonald's like everywhere. I think I've eaten McDonald's in 5 countries. I find Nike, a lot of these, and we call a lot of these multinational countries right now. A lot of them are. Like we think of them, oh yeah, it's an American company. Well, not anymore. Their head office is over here, and all their stuff is made over there. So is it really? All right. So just examples of trade organizations: European Union, NAFTA, the ASEAN, OPEC, and when we study U.S. history, we talk quite a bit about these organizations. Barriers to trade: tariff, a tax against imports, and whenever you have a tariff, you basically charge the importer that charge, and how they make it up is they increase the amount of money that they sell it for. So really a tariff is on the buyer, actually. And the whole point of a tariff is to adjust the price of the things coming in so your local industries can compete with it or do better than them. Embargo, to block an import completely. Embargoes are usually done right before or to prevent a war against a country that you have problems with, right? And so oil embargo, right? Like right now, I think with Iran, right? So that's been going on for the longest time, ever since like 79. Quota, to limit the amount of an import. So you might have a quota on a certain resource. Once again, just like a tariff, you don't want to bring in too much because you don't want to hurt competition with your own businesses. So you're like, okay, we're going to bring in so many boats of this year. We can skip that. Of course, there are major religions throughout the world: Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Judaism, Islam, so on and so forth. There's actually a lot of other religions out there as well. Taoism.
So,
I think I've heard Zoroastrianism's kind of having a comeback. It's kind of weird to think about. Cultural change.
actually, yeah.
Culture hurts. Cultural diffusion basically has to be like our culture spreads throughout the world and other cultures. Like I see examples of every time I have lunch and the seniors are in here, they're like always either watching anime or they're playing video games. And that's a lot of cultural diffusion there. Like, for example, you look at like food, right? Food can be an example. So that's going to cut it. So, folks, when we come back, we're going to start going over more of continental and continental regions. And so please, once again, make sure you're working on your study island and your project. See you later.